You can watch three things forever: how fire burns, how water flows, and how Khinkali spins in a glass pot. Sometimes you pour more, sometimes you sprinkle, sometimes you pour more, sometimes you sprinkle. The meat should fully absorb the water. The dough becomes very pliable, that is, soft. We're making homemade Khinkali. They say you need to make 15 to 17 folds, and some even say 19 folds. Look at the thin dough. Lots of meat and a convenient handle. You could say it's like a Mercedes in a car showroom. If you say Georgian cuisine out loud, Khachapuri and Khinkali share the pedestal, this championship is split exactly in half, in my opinion. And today I'm going to make one of these dishes, namely Khinkali. Actually, that's not correct, no, Khinkali. First, we'll make the dough. The dough only has 3 ingredients. I add the flour, then 120 grams of water, and we add 1/3 of a spoon of flour. By the way, just so there's no intrigue, I have 330 grams here. I mix 1/3 of a teaspoon of salt right into the water. The water is regular, room temperature, just filtered. As much as we can, we mix it and pour it into the flour. We need to knead a stiff dough. First, I'll put on gloves and start kneading. Then, when the dough stops sticking to my hands, I'll finish kneading it without the gloves. Each type of flour has its own level of gluten stickiness. And to be more precise, you should focus on what I get in the video. After kneading the dough, which I had already dumped onto the table, I ended up with a dense lump like this. And honestly, those were probably the hardest 10 minutes of today's filming. What do we do next? I'm taking the dough now, covering it with plastic wrap and letting it rest so the gluten can develop for about 20 minutes, 30 at most. And in the meantime, I'll work on the filling. We're making the filling for Khinkali. I'm taking 400 grams of homemade ground meat. Many people will probably ask, how is it homemade if it's in this shape? As if I just dumped it out of a tray I bought at the store. Homemade means it's a mix of beef and pork ground meat. 50-50. Next, salt. 1 teaspoon without a heap. Black ground pepper, about half a teaspoon. But adjust to your own taste. Done. Pepper, chili, hot pepper. Here I have both the seeds and the pepper whorls. I'll use about half a teaspoon. Let's move on. The next ingredients are garlic and onion. I'll take 1 clove of garlic and a small onion, about 30 grams. We simply grate the onion and garlic. The next ingredient is garlic, which we also grate. Nothing new. I washed a small bunch of cilantro, about 50 grams, and now I'll chop it fairly coarsely. We add it to the meat. The final ingredient is water. For 300 grams of meat, I use 200 milliliters of water. Pour it in and start mixing. The meat should fully absorb the water. Mix well so that the spices are evenly distributed along with the garlic, onion, and greens everywhere, and so that the water is absorbed properly. That is, we shouldn't see any standing water. Don't be surprised. The broth comes directly from the Khinkali dumplings. That's where it's sourced from. Notice that all the water has been absorbed. We also need the spices to spread evenly. In about 10 to 15 minutes, we'll begin preparing the Khinkali. The dough has rested, and notice when I press it with my finger like this, the dough becomes very pliable, meaning it's soft. We used to make it by sweating buckets, but now everything is fine. We roll out the dough. I won't even dust it with flour, and cut out circles for Khinkali. We roll the dough out quite thin. Let's see, maybe about 2 or 3 millimeters thick. Rolling out dough is a pleasure, especially for those who don't exercise regularly. But I don't know how delicate, fragile girls manage to make these kinds of dough and meat creations. It's very hard, really hard. I armed myself with a small plate and rolled the dough out to about 2 millimeters thick. And now I need to cut out these little circles. I'll just cut as many as I can get, however many I get, and then we'll start shaping the circles that we measured out at the beginning. We roll it out slightly, just a little, and place it on a plate that has a smile shape so the filling doesn't run off. You know, our filling is quite liquid, so you understand, and then we put a spoonful on top. Center. Now we measure by finger and start making folds. They say you need to make 15, 17, some even say 19 folds, but here, just make as many as you can. In any case, these are our homemade khinkali, and here we pinch the khinkali like this, it's ready. We put on the water is almost boiling. I salt it just like with dumplings. Now we make a funnel. Why do we need all this? When we lower the khinkali in, it's important that they don't get stuck on the bottom and don't tear. We lower the khinkali and keep making the funnel until we've put them all in and until they float to the surface. As soon as the khinkali float to the surface, we keep them in the boiling water for 7 minutes and then serve them. It's time to take the khinkali out of the water and put them on a plate. So now I'm taking the pot away, adding a little pepper, and we're going to try them. Where would we be without our favorite cilantro, Lichka? A few sprigs, and as I said, some ground pepper, just a little bit like this. I think it's just perfect. Pay attention. Wow, you really hit me with that pepper in the nose. Now I'm going to take, in my opinion, the very best khinkali. Well, I can't give you a proper tour because I'm not that deeply familiar, but from what I know, you need to turn them over so that all the juice flows into this imaginary container. Take a bite. That's exactly cilantro inside. It just changes the picture, and now we choose the juice. And as for the juice, where did it come from? It's the water that was mixed together. There it goes. It started flowing. Look, there it is. Get a close-up and do it quicker. Rich broth. There are spices and a meaty flavor. It's just amazing. Look, thin dough, lots of meat, and a convenient handle. You could say it's like in a car showroom. The dough is a bit bland though. I would add a bit more salt, but as they say, it's a matter of taste and preference. Friends, before I say goodbye, I want you to write in the comments, how often do you eat khinkali? And in general, do you like Georgian cuisine? Maybe we should cook something else as well. Well, I want to thank you for watching. Be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and don't be afraid to experiment.